Hello and welcome. I'm joined yet again by Populi, and we're going to chat about what's going on in Spain at the moment. There are some incredible natural disasters happening in different parts of Spain. And just before I hit the record here, Pox told me about another weather front that's happening in a different part of Spain. So it just seems really, really crazy at the moment. Pox, how are you?
Hello, I'm all right. Good to chat with you again. Looking forward to this one. We are outsiders. We're not Spanish, but we both have quite a lot of experience with Spain. So I think this should be an interesting and informative conversation for people who might not be aware of what's going on. But I really think the world's eyes should fix on Spain right now. There's some pretty important stuff going on here.
Yeah, and I did a quick search before coming on just to see what headlines were going on online, and I have the following. I have devastating rainfall hits Spain in yet another flood-related disaster. That was a day ago. Another one, what is Dana? The strange weather phenomenon that has caused deadly flooding. And I have this one, which I thought was, it says it all really. A month's worth of rain falls in a single day in parts of Spain. Yeah, and then there's a death toll. Spain floods death toll rises to 158 as rescuers comb for survivors. Now, I've seen a few clips. It doesn't look good at all. It's really crazy. The infrastructure in many parts of Valencia seems to, it seems destroyed. Railways, roads. I've put in some images for the thumbnail of this, and you can see like cars just piled up on the street. So Pox, you can go anywhere with this, and I'm sure we're going to talk about different aspects of it anyway. But go ahead. What are your initial thoughts about this?
Well, let's just start by the most mainstream, bare bones perspective on this. So much of Europe has been seeing heavy rainfall for the past several weeks. A little over a month ago, or maybe actually a little under a month rather, there was flooding in Austria, Serbia, and Hungary. The Danube overflowed its banks. It caused not grave damage, but there was, significant damage. The government, the military soldiers had to be called into action all throughout these places. There were some pretty impressive videos. Obviously, everyone's got a camera in their pocket, so impressive videos were taken of the power of these floods. And that heavy rainfall seems to have picked up again this month, and just a matter of weeks ago, there was severe flooding in Emilia-Romagna in northern Italy, fatal flooding there. People actually died, not as many as in Spain, but there were a few deaths, people getting swept up by the waters. And then it was Spain's turn. And as you said, there's this claim that basically a year's worth of rainfall has fallen in certain parts of the country. Obviously, Spain topographically is a very diverse country. If you go into the north, it looks like Wales, it looks like Ireland, and it rains a lot and it's rather green. If you go to the south, it's kind of like Africa. There's a wet season and a dry season, and the winter is usually just a bit rainy, but with still several sunny, quite warm days actually. So I assume that those days that got hit with a year's worth of rainfall were in the south. There was significant rain in Aragon, for example. There's an ancient Roman dam. It's over 2,000 years old near Saragossa, and it's still holding up as strong as ever, doing its duty to redirect floodwaters away from the population, away from the buildings, and into a safer path as far as humans are concerned. So that was pretty amazing to see. And then the most affected area is in Valencia. It's the autonomous region of Valencia, and the city also that carries that same name. Now, is this, like you said, there's these pictures of just completely destroyed roads, cars piled up, cars smashed into buildings, over 100 dead. I'm sure 158 is actually nowhere near the real number, and that number is going to keep going up. Was this all the result of heavy rainfall? Not quite, because Spain is leading the European Union in the dismantling of dams and irrigation canals that someone or some committee deemed obsolete. And I remember posting about this on my Telegram channel back in 2021. I think it was 2021 or 2022. And I said, keep an eye on this. This was all a part of the Great Reset. This was all a part of river restoration and these well-meaning, good-sounding ideas about, rewilding Europe, about letting these rivers flow, taking down obsolete dams, and restoring the rivers and the fisheries and everything. The wild fish will return, and all this stuff that sounds great. And if that was the true nature of the Great Reset, we could all be in favor of it. But when we are ruled by short-sighted, pencil-pushing bureaucrats, or worse, ideologically malevolent zealots intent on a controlled demolition of Europe, well, then these policies take a much darker tone. And curiously, many of the dams that were removed were in this area of the region of Valencia that is now, quite literally wiped out by floods. And these irrigation canals that Franco set up, and these dams that were built during the Franco era, that he designed specifically to avoid this situation, because this isn't the first time this has happened. It's called the Dana, but the Spaniards actually have an older term for this. It's called gota fria. Literally, that's cold drop. But this is a weather phenomenon that has occurred on the Iberian Peninsula in the past. It's not because of climate change. It's not because of man-made climate change, because you've been driving a Fiat 500 for too many years. This has happened in the past, and Franco built dams and irrigation canals around Valencia. And there's places that weren't touched by the floods because those dams and irrigation canals are still standing. But in the areas where, the committee, it might have been the Greens, it might have been, the PSOE ruling party of Spanish socialists, whoever, it might have come down from Brussels, because other European countries participated in this as well. Spain was just the leader. Spain demolished over 100 dams, and many of them were these ones that were built by Franco to avoid these kinds of situations. And other reasons as well, but that was one of the reasons. So it's not just that there was a natural disaster or Mother Nature getting a bit angry. There's man-made incompetence and malevolence at play here too.
Yeah, I've visited some of those reservoirs that were built in the early 70s. And you talk about, restoring the rivers and all this, but those reservoirs, from what I've seen, they're immaculately clean, and you'll find crayfish in them. And as far as I know, crayfish need very clean water in which to live. But yeah, it ties into this idea as well, that you have a lot of bureaucrats now, and they like taking down things that were erected during the Franco regime.
Yep.
And I'm sure when they decide to demolish a dam, there is this idea that they're destroying a bit of history, a certain chapter that they don't like. and screw the consequences, And I know I spent time in a part of Spain in Catalonia, and I used to go down to one of those reservoirs very frequently, and you would see, it would slope down a good distance, like a few kilometers from the village. And as it sloped down, and every time they let the water out, you would have hoses where people would use the water to look after their tomatoes and their olives and things like that. Very, very useful. And that was a massive problem in Spain before those dams. People went through months and months of the dry season, and they just lost their entire crops. So they were very useful. So this thing talks about Dana. I don't understand. I think this is an American influence. This idea of calling hurricanes, calling them after people, like using a person's name for a natural disaster. I still find it very weird. And the first time I heard of it was in the early 90s. There was, I don't know, was it in Florida? It was called Hurricane Allen, I think. And I just thought, why are they calling a hurricane Allen? Is there someone out there called Allen who's crazy guy or something? So yeah, I just found that very strange.
Can I interrupt you there? Just a moment. Yeah. It's not named after anyone with the name Dana.
Right.
So it's not an American thing. It's an acronym, because if you noticed, whenever you see it, it's in all capital letters.
I see that. Yeah.
Yeah. So just let me check and see what it stands for.
Yeah, I tried to look it up, but I couldn't find it.
Okay, let me just see if I can find something.
Yeah. I'll keep going anyway. Yeah. But yeah, this is a problem, and yeah, a lot of the cities.
I got it here. It's depresión aislada en niveles altos. So isolated depression in high levels.
Right. Okay.
Don't know what that means. That sounds like some technical terms there, but yeah, that's what it stands for.
Right. It's kind of funny that the acronym actually could be a name as well. It could be Dana, right? Yeah. Dana Scully, from the X-Files. Yeah. Right. But yeah, I know some of the cities down around there. I've been to Valencia and I've been to Alicante, and I know that in Alicante, for example, you get torrential rain every year, and some of the streets haven't really been engineered for that rainfall, and they do flood. Now, not the kind of floods we're seeing now in Valencia, but it does happen that streets become flooded because of the rain. You get a lot of rain in 24 hours. So as you say, this is nothing new, but something has gone awry here. And the more I'm reading about this, the more I get a sense this is a serious disaster here.
Yeah. Well, look, like I said at the start, we're both outsiders. So whenever someone, who's not a member of your family criticizes your brother, you don't take kindly to that. You can criticize your brother, but a stranger can't. And so I don't want to upset any Spaniards, but I'm going to be rather critical of Spain, because there's some very sinister things going on here. And this country has some problems that are not unique to Spain, because they are in other countries. They're like, so for example, one we can touch on later, which I'm sure we will, with regards to the looting that's going on, is this thing in Spain of the ocupas, which also happens in Italy, but it's much more prevalent in Spain. And there's other things like that where it really is like almost a uniquely Spanish problem. Spain has these things. One of Spain's problems is desertification, man-caused desertification of Spain. Spain actually has a lot of, like I said, topographical diversity, diversity of terrain, diversity of ecosystems. But that is being lost because Spain turned almost the entire country into an olive grove and vineyards, but mainly olive groves to have this massive olive oil industry. And if you look at satellite maps, Spain is always brown when the rest of Europe around it is green. And one thing that happens is that, during the summer, especially in the south, there'll be many days without rain, and it's very sunny and warm, and the ground is dry. And then what happens is that when the rainfalls begin, the ground is so dry that it doesn't actually absorb the water. The water just kind of runs off the ground, and it's very bad for cultivation, because the rain is effectively not providing sustenance. The ground can't absorb the rainfall. It's too dry. The water just glides off of it, and this is causing all sorts of problems. I know many agricultores, and they are telling me every year they have to use more and more chemical fertilizer, and some of them have even said that the summers feel hotter. I'm not quite sure about that, but I can see maybe where they're coming from, that the summers are drier and hotter. And we're talking about a country where it's not a tinfoil hat conspiracy theory. The government itself and most interestingly, the autonomous community of Valencia itself have confirmed that they use weather manipulating technology, that they do cloud seeding, that they, I remember reading a mainstream article with the title, and the title it used the verb bombardear, bombarding. The title was that a private company had been caught bombarding the sky with chemicals and metals in order to manipulate the weather and enhance the season of orange trees, the orange harvest, basically, to get more of yield out of their orange trees. This has also been confirmed in Valencia and elsewhere, that during tourist season, they do weather manipulation to impede cloud formation so that the days remain sunny and people go to the beach. So, and this is all confirmed by what are called boletín oficial, official government bulletin, basically announcements, proclamations. So it's both private and public. There's corporations, private industry that's doing this, and the government is doing it. The autonomous community of Valencia has done this. It's confirmed that it does this. And so, yeah, these agriculturists, these farmers that are saying, like, the weather is different, the seasons aren't the same, the ground's not absorbing rainwater, everything is really dry, I'm using more and more chemical fertilizer, the country is drier and browner, there's this big problem of man-made desertification. What's going on here? Everyone kind of knows this too. Everyone's looking up and seeing it, but we're all told that chemtrails are a conspiracy theory, cloud seeding is a conspiracy theory, geoengineering is a conspiracy theory, and so no one's listening to the warnings or the complaints of the people.
Yeah, I've spoken on a number of occasions about geoengineering. Now, it's been around a long time. Cloud seeding has been around for almost a century. However, very few people seem to know about it. And where I live, we do get bombarded on a daily basis. It's very rare that I see a blue sky. And that's not because of natural clouds. It's because of the chemtrails. You have about 1,000 of them, individual chemtrails across the sky. And they form one massive blanket and it blocks out the sun. And I'm sure, like, obviously, to every action and all that, there has to be some consequence for blocking out the sun. It must change the weather in some way. I'm not saying it's responsible for these floods, but there is a man-made element to it now, this idea of changing the weather. So yeah, and I've spoken to a lot of Spanish people about it. I've even been on the street pointing up at the sky, and they shrug their shoulders. They don't really know what I'm talking about. Now, I don't be getting all passionate. I just say to them, it's always cloudy here. Look, the planes leave these lines, and they don't seem to have any sort of opinion on it at all.
Yeah.
And I always found that worrisome, that people, they don't even look up at the sky now and ask questions. They just don't do it.
Well, keeping on with some of this, more alternative explanations for what might have been the cause of this weather phenomenon. It's also interesting to note that according to meteorological maps, radar maps, there was some very bizarre weather formations occurring over Cadiz. Weather formations that had like straight right angular lines. If you look at the green swirling cloud formation on the radar map, it should be circular. It should be kind of floofy, it should have some wisps going off here and there. And yet, if you look closely, you'll see that there are straight lines. That's not natural. And as it goes over Cadiz, a Cadiz radar station actually ended up sort of discombobulating this weather formation, this weather pattern that was forming. It's just sort of like broke it up molecular on a molecular level, I suppose. And then a few days later, another one crops up over Valencia, over the region of Valencia. And in this case, the Valencia radar station was not active. It was dysfunctional. And people had been warning about this. There is a Spanish farmer who's also sort of an internet celebrity in a way. He calls himself El Payeter. He's from Valencia. And he was trying to get the local Valencian government's attention and saying the radar station's not working. I'm telling you, it's broken down, or it's not functional, or something's gone wrong with the weather alert system in the radar station. He was ignored, of course. And then, lo and behold, these floods happen, or this period of storm and heavy rainfall occurs, and the people of Valencia were not given any warning. And then the government didn't even issue an alert, an emergency alert, a warning to the people until the water was up to their knees. And, cars were starting to be swept away by the floods in the streets. So there's just some really mysterious things going on with the timeline and with the apparent incompetence, which I think you might agree, Betwixt. I'm no longer of the position that it's incompetence. I think it's malevolence until proven incompetence. But either way, both are very bad.
Well, you have to say that during this pandemic, they were very competent indeed. They were able to incarcerate the entire population for weeks at a time. Even in villages, you had the police patrolling maybe the 2 or 3 streets that made up the village around the clock. They were patrolling the streets of a little village. Yeah,
this is another great point, because one of the things, as we get away from the weather and now onto what's been going on after the fact, after the floods and the rainfall, the Guardia Civil, the military, which was so well deployed during COVID, you had Guardia Civil in the streets checking to make sure that nobody was outside walking their dog without wearing a mask. That actually literally happened to me. Okay, you had a very streamlined and effective system. You had communication from the president at all times, total lockstep with all of the autonomous communities and the king and the deputies and the congressmen and all that stuff. Now, there is none of that. There are private WhatsApp messages being filtered out by independent journalists and their contacts that they have in the military or in the Guardia Civil, and they are all saying the same thing. We have stand-down orders. We want to move out, but we're told to wait. We're told we're not deploying. There are reports, and there are not even just rumors, not just reports and rumors, but like actual video testimony of people working for relief efforts, trying to go from Madrid, driving trucks full of resources into Valencia. They are being blocked. And this all just sounds a lot like what happened recently in Florida and the Carolinas after the hurricane landed in the United States. It's the same thing. These ideologically captured, perverse institutions now work in an antagonistic manner against their own people And in the case of the United States, it was FEMA and the National Guard and whatnot that refused or were told not to help. And then not only that, but they impeded private citizens from helping themselves, from helping each other, from helping their neighbors. Just briefly, there was video of, white guys, local boys, trying to help by they're pilots, they're private pilots, and they wanted to just fly their planes full of material resources into the affected areas, and then lo and behold, there's all these FEMA vehicles blocking the landing strip. Or in another case, some people had set up a huge area with pavilions, tables, kiosks full of boxes of material, food, blankets, all sorts of stuff. And then this United States military helicopter does a low fly and with the power of its blades blows everything away. And now out of Spain, it's the same thing. In fact, the what do you call it? I guess the president of Valencia, his last name is Mason, which is kind of ironic. It's not with an S, it's with a Z, but it kind of sounds like Mason, like Mason, Freemason. But anyway, he said that the government will not, take off the table measures to stop people from obstructing the roadways. And by that, he means the people who are trying to help their neighbors, independent of the government, because the government's not doing anything. So again, it's just very sinister. What's going on here?
I heard that was happening in North Carolina. I heard it was happening a lot, that you had people who were ready and willing, and they were stopped by the government, more or less. And I think when you have a natural disaster, and I know you said there's a malevolence there as well, but let's say it's a natural disaster and the government was caught with its pants down, and its reaction, instead of helping, is to maintain its power, and it doesn't like the idea of regional solidarity or kind of even a temporary autonomy. It just doesn't want it, and it does everything in its power to stop people from saving other people's lives. It sounds crazy, but this is what happens. If we could go back, Pox, because you mentioned them, and it is very much a Spanish thing, los ocupas. Now, when I found out about this a number of years ago, I had Spanish people explaining it to me, and I didn't believe them, the same way they wouldn't believe me pointing up at the sky. And they said that in Spain, it generally seems to happen if you have a second residence, let's say a summer home or a winter home. And the ocupas, who I heard they can be North Africans or they can be gypsies, generally, they will scope a place out, find out, if there's an apartment that's unoccupied, and they will move in the thick of night. And then this is the kicker now, and this is why I didn't believe the Spaniards when they told me this, right? So not only can you not legally get them out of your own property, but you have to continue paying for the electricity that they consume. You have to pay for their water. And I've seen a number of videos where you have these elderly people, and that property was kind of their nest egg, and suddenly it's costing them a fortune, and they can't get the vermin, more or less, out of their properties. And I've spoken to a lot of Spanish people about this, and I get different angles, I get different perspectives. Some people say, well, and would you believe it, Pox, these are people who promote bringing in unlimited migrants from the third world. They will say, well, you see, the problem is there's a housing crisis. There aren't enough homes in Spain, and therefore, if people have a second residence, then I think it's only fair that people who don't have a place to stay can move into that property. And then obviously you've the other people who say that, this shouldn't happen at all. These people shouldn't be allowed to just move into someone's property. So this is crazy, I think, overall. The system they have here for Los Ocupas. Like, it seems that once you move into someone's property, their second property, for example, you can't really get them out, or it's going to take a long time. It's going to take a number of years to get them out. And by the time you get them out, the place will be just destroyed. Property value will nosedive. What do you make of this, Los Ocupas?
Yeah, it's yeah, I remember feeling the same as you. I still do to this day. It's just completely absurd. I struggle to comprehend how something so retarded can be protected by law. I think this is Spanish law that allows this to happen, which is just another reason why, people who define their morality based on what is legal and illegal are taking the rug out from under themselves, because we have so many immoral laws. And like I said earlier, this is not a uniquely Spanish problem, but it almost is, because this sort of thing does happen in Italy. It does happen in France. It even happens, I think, in some of the Anglosphere. We have the term squatters, but usually those are in abandoned buildings. What happens in Spain is that, as you said, you could go out. For example, this just happened to a man in Valencia. He goes out with a shovel to help his community because, the military, they haven't sent any sappers. There are people who are still stuck under or trapped within rubble. They can't get out. The roadways are all blocked. Everything is just completely destroyed and covered in mud. And the military is not there with any vehicles or sappers or anything. So people are outside with shovels trying to dig out, people from the debris or free up roadways and all sorts of things like that. And this man returns to his home. Maybe it's his second home. Supposedly, legally, it has to be a second home. And he finds out that it's been occupied. People went into his home and claimed it as their own while he was out trying to save people's lives, because the state hasn't done anything to help. And as you said, the vast majority of these ocupas are absolute scum of the earth people. The vast majority will be gypsies, or they will be North Africans or Sub-Saharans. If they are Spanish ocupas, they are usually the type that you would associate with pot-smoking anarchists, Rastafarian hairstyles, wearing that, disgusting clothing that looks like a cross between, old pajamas and a burlap sack. And they take over someone's property and then they destroy it while squatting in it. And this is a nightmare that every Spanish person with a second home has to deal with. People who have country houses, you should see, and I'm sure you have seen, the home defense systems, the locks they have on the doors, the chains they have around the gates, so that no one can come into their country house when they're not there, into their little holiday home. In some cases, these are just humble homes. I know people. I live in the poorest part of Spain, but people have these homes that they inherit from their grandparents. That maybe the great grandfather built a wine bodega, had a vineyard, and built a bodega, a house, and over the generations, maybe they've expanded. They added an extra bedroom, or they expanded the kitchen or something. As the years go on and it gets a bit modernized, but they're nothing spectacular. They're not like, English estate homes. These aren't mansions, but it's a family's second home. It's often shared between the extended family. And then, at any given time, though, a bunch of gypsies or Maghrebis could invade, jump the fence, short circuit the security systems, bust the door down, and now it's theirs. You, the owner of that home, no longer own that home. You can't get them out. They are now protected by law. It's just insane. And there's all these nationalist groups that have cropped up in opposition to this. And one has become particularly famous. There's this one individual who has become particularly famous. I don't know his name right now, but he's this big, strong guy. He's basically a giant. He's got huge arms. He's got covered in tattoos. He's a really imposing figure, and he just goes around kicking out okupas because the police won't do it. So he does it. You can hire him, or he does it pro bono, maybe even. And he just goes in, and when he's he's looming over these weak-statured, broccoli-haired Maghrebis, with their tracksuits, their Paris Saint-Germain tracksuits, and he's standing over them dressed in black with biceps that are bigger than their heads. Some of these videos are a real white pill to watch, but it's just this guy. He's doing it by himself. Like I said, it's just there's some really insane and sinister things that happen in this country.
Yeah, it would also be quite dangerous though entering those, because sometimes you got 7 or 8.
Oh yeah. North
Africans, and God only knows what weapons they have, So.
Oh yeah, and the nationalist groups that do this too, they definitely risk their lives doing this, because you don't know what kind of human garbage is waiting for you inside, or what kind of weapons they're going to be wielding, or how they're going to react. You don't really know. It can get really bad, yeah, and that's why it's such a nightmare situation, because if you do have this happen to you, let's say you're just a normal guy, like what can you do? You can't break in and fight them. You might not have the means or the skills to do that, and they might outnumber you, and there's no one you can call to help. You can't do anything.
Yeah,
I saw a clip. It's awful.
I saw a clip about 2 weeks ago. It was an elderly Spanish man, and he was outside the apartment building. I think he had rung the doorbell for his apartment that was occupied, and some of them came out, the palo broccolis, and they were just on the street laughing at him and kind of shoving him a bit, and because they know the law's on their side. And this old man, who most likely worked all his life, this was his nest egg, and now he's out on the street looking up, and they're kind of looking down on him and laughing at him, thinking he's a total clown. And I guess he feels like a clown when his own country turns against him and doesn't protect him and his interests. So, right, Pox, we'll finish this up by talking about the looting. Now, you said I've seen, to be honest, I saw one video clip of looting, but I've heard that there has been a lot of looting throughout Valencia. Actually, sorry, I've seen 2 clips. One was, I think, a North African tried to steal some Romanian guy's car, and I think did you see that one? Yeah, he tied him up.
Yeah, I've seen the one where the Romanian takes him down and binds him.
Yeah,
he overpowers the attempted mugging or something, or whatever it was, carjacking. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. So would you like to go into that about the looting? What you've seen anyway?
Yeah, I've seen quite a few, several videos. For the most part, what you see, and I will say this, there are some videos where it doesn't look like I would describe it as looting. It looks like more like desperate. Is it a direct synonym? I don't know. It's like ransacking, I guess, of like resources before everyone else takes stuff. It's pure panic and chaos. It's like when people bought all the toilet rolls during the scamdemic. So you'll see like a supermarket that's actually completely destroyed, and there's water everywhere, and the ceiling has caved in, and there's cables hanging from the ceiling, and people are ransacking the aisles, the shelves. Okay, so there is that going on, but that's because people are dying of thirst now. People are dying of hunger now, right? They're trapped. No one is coming to help them, and people are dying because they don't have any food or water where they've been trapped, or they've run out, because this is now going on for its like 3rd day, I think, as of this recording. And so that's one thing. Then there's other videos where you see the usual suspects, gypsies, North Africans, and blacks, doing what the usual suspects usually do. It's getting to the point now where very soon it'll be just like the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, and especially what happened in the arena where all of these blacks were sheltering. And it just became a den of rape and abuse and thieving and murder and filth. And then the rest of the city too. There were mobs, roving gangs of blacks just stealing and looting, taking advantage of the chaos to steal televisions and Air Jordans. And then you had white vigilantes, patrolling the streets with their guns. And so it's getting to that situation. There are armed groups of Spaniards armed with not guns, obviously, although I'm sure some Spanish people do have guns, but not most. And so they're armed with other things, baseball bats, knives, clubs, things like that. And they're patrolling the streets. And again, there is no military presence. There's no Guardia Civil. There's no police. And in fact, the king is the only one who's that I've seen as of this moment who's actually mobilized anything. And he has sent the royal guard and his own personal security detail to the affected areas in Valencia to provide some sort of assistance, because there's nothing. And so, yeah, the looting is going on. And of course, Spain has a massive problem too, which again, it's not unique to Spain. And in this case, it's definitely not unique to Spain. All the other Western European countries are like this too. But of course, Spain has its entrenched population of libtards and progressives and neo-Bolsheviks who are, posting Twitter threads and snarky things on social media, or posting messages of solidarity with the marginalized communities, and trying to warn against misinformation coming from the far right about lootings and marginalized, oppressed communities roaming the streets, committing violence and looting, forming gangs of looters. And then in the replies, you just see like people posting the video evidence. Everyone has a fucking camera in their pocket. People are taking videos of what's going on. And so, yeah, it's something that's happening because, as we all know, if you import the third world, you become the third world, because the third world isn't a place. It is a people. And when you have brought those people into your society, you're going to suffer the consequences. I saw a video on Twitter. They were shouting, as they're trying to, these people are looting, it's like some gypsies are looting, and they're looting not just shops, they're looting people's homes, they're looting parking garages. And he shouts, sin vergüenza, you guys are shameless. And then he even shouts, lo lleváis en la sangre, it's in your blood. This is in your blood, you thieving bastards. This is in your blood. There's and then someone else said that there's nothing, something to the effect of like, there's no culture that can cure you guys. And in the case of the gypsies, that's definitely true. These people have been in our societies for centuries, and they have never stopped behaving the way they behave. Dirty, criminal, thieves, bandits, looters, drug pushers, who then all cry about being marginalized and mistreated and stereotyped and stigmatized. It's so tiresome.
Yeah, I'd like to actually, at some stage, I'd like to find out a bit more about the gypsies. I know in Spain you have gypsies that have been in Spain a long, long time. And then you have the recent Roma gypsy, the Roma people, as they...
Yeah, Spain has like two types. It's kind of like how Ireland has their native travelers.
Yeah.
And then now, especially now, with the recent increase of mass immigration, you're getting these other gypsies that come from Romania and Hungary and places like that. And Spain's kind of the same way. They have their You can tell who is who usually. There's the type of gypsies that like actually, you know, they keep to themselves in their areas of like Granada, and they do flamenco shows. Uh, and they have like long black hair, and they dance flamenco and play flamenco guitar. And then you have the Roma gypsy, which came over from originally from India via Romania and Hungary and Poland, and now they've come over into Spain. And
Yeah,
so
they were
you get
expelled,
like the two
Pox, as far as
types.
I know. They were expelled from India because
Yeah,
because
yeah.
rumor
Like
has it
another
they were
certain
thieving, they
tribe
were
that we
thieving
all are familiar
bastards
with.
centuries ago, and they were
Yeah,
expelled, and they ended up in Europe. Like they traveled across North Africa as well, I think, and
yeah,
across Europe,
yeah, yeah.
and so they've been in Europe
I've been making this
centuries.
post, this recurring post on Twitter, usually attached with usually accompanying some video demonstrating the point, where I've just been asking, like, is there any other race apart from the white race, apart from the European peoples, who is forced to live with such foreign human detritus? Because whether it's the gypsies or the blacks in America or the blacks here now, or the Jews, or these other, populations that aren't native to us, that aren't a part of our kin, but we have to babysit them, or we're forced to share our living spaces with them. They contribute nothing but chaos and filth and crime. Does this happen anywhere else? Do the Japanese live with foreign peoples that make everything dirty and dangerous? With the Chinese, I know the Chinese have several different ethnicities in their country, but seems like everyone pretty much knows that the Han Chinese dominate, and we all abide by their rules. And I don't think there's a large population of Jews, Africans, or Gypsies in China. Does anyone else put up with this? Suffer this? It's just us.
But there must be something wrong with whites. There must be some, because I spent time in Romania over the summer there, and you have this impression that Romanians are very swarthy people and all this, but when you actually go there, a lot of them look, quintessentially European. And
right, because we've only seen the gypsies with Romanian passports.
That's it. Exactly. And when I was there, like the only people who begged me for money were gypsies. And I got a number of taxis when I was there, and the only ones who fleeced me were the gypsy taxi drivers. So like, there's something going on there. And I notice as well that when you're in a taxi belonging to a gypsy in Romania, he's playing music that sounds exactly like the music from India.
Yes,
so
it's the same in Hungary.
Centuries away from India, centuries of European culture, and yet he could go back to India tomorrow and he would fit in.
Go to spend enough time in Budapest, whether it's a bus or the metro, and or even just walking the streets, the busier parts of the streets, and you'll see these gypsy descendants, these Roma descendants from those areas of India, and on their smartphones or from a sound system, like, I don't know what people have, like, one of the things I hate about the modern world is that people walk around with like portable speakers blaring their music so that everyone else has to hear it. I hate that. I don't understand that.
If they go into cafes and there's music on, they'll actually turn their music up so it's even louder than the music in the cafe. Yeah.
That's awful. But they do this, and the music that they're listening to or the video they're watching on their phone is like pure India. It's like straight out of Mumbai. I mean, I laugh because I don't know I'm actually angry. I don't want to say horrible things and get, the video taken down or whatever, but it's horrible that we have to put up with this. And, there must be something wrong with us then. And I think in our last chat that we did about Christianity, we kind of got into some of those reasons.
Just to let you know, sorry, Pox, just to let you know that for some reason, our second video in relation to that chat got a lot of downvotes. Now, you won't see the downvotes, but people felt so passionate about it. They wanted me to know that they didn't like the videos.
Well, I saw that one actually had like 1,000 views.
That's the one. Yeah, that's the one.
And I do have it. I do have the thing. I did install it so I can see the downvotes.
Right.
I don't know. I haven't checked to see if I guess now there's 1,000 views, there must be more downvotes. But As far as I remember, the comments seem pretty positive. But yeah, I mean, that's a subject that people get very uncomfortable with. They don't like to hear some certain things, but facts don't care about your feelings.
Very true, very true. So, Pox, we'll wind this up. And you said to me before we hit the record here that there are possibly some positive signs coming from this, that maybe when there's a natural disaster like this, it's a wake-up call for the indigenous people, that they might start, noticing patterns, shall we say. And do you think in the case of Valencia and all that's gone on, that there might be more a sense of Spanish kinship going forward?
Well, Spanish kinship, no. I think we live in such an age of ideological zealotry and division that ideology has found a way to dominate biology. And that actually is one of the reasons why nothing seems to make sense, and we have all these retarded and intractable problems, because we have gone so far against the natural order, and now our ideological artifices dominate our biology. Actually, they supersede our biology and our natural way of doing things. What I think is a positive in this, and like I said earlier, I was critical of Spain, and I could say a lot of things more critical of Spain, but Spain does have very good people here. There is some good in the Spaniards still. There is some strength left in the hearts of men, to quote the Lord of the Rings. Spain does have some very healthy nationalist sentiment, nationalist groups, patriotism. Some of it gets directed to the wrong place. Some of it gets misguided intentionally towards, love of the flag and the nation state, the institutions, the Constitution. But there is some genuine blood and soil nationalism, patriotism in the Spanish people, in some of the Spanish people. There's some common sense, salt of the earth, wisdom in the Spanish people. But then you also have, so much division. As you know, Spain is not really a united country. It's a collection of autonomous regions that pretend to be a united country. And this actually is one of the problems right now, is that Valencia is an autonomous community. Who's supposed to declare the state of emergency? Well, that's the national government. That's the Spanish Socialist Workers' Party, and Pedro Sanchez, the president, is supposed to do that, and he hasn't. And then the supporters of Pedro Sanchez and the leftists in government are saying, no, it's Valencia's own fault. It's their own local government's fault. They're the ones that are mismanaging this. Everyone's pointing the finger. And then there's further division. The governor of Valencia, or the president of Valencia, is a member of the People's Party, which is a fake center-right party. It's basically like the Spanish Tories. But of course, for theatrics' sake, for appearances' sake, the Spanish leftist Socialist Workers' Party and the Partido Popular, the People's Party, are rivals. So they can't be seen to be being too helpful towards each other or too nice towards each other. The political divisions supersede, normal human reaction, solidarity, working together. So my thought was that the positive that comes from this is that the world gets to see the dystopia that Spain has become. There's some real sinister problems in Spain. Spain is like I said earlier, a leader in the bad sense. They are leading the European Union in all the bad ways. They are fully on board with Agenda 2030. I mentioned the king earlier, how he sent the Royal Guard and all that. And I have a sort of tongue-in-cheek post about the king rising up and dissolving parliament and restoring the absolute monarchy to save the country. But the king is actually just another, ceremonial, decorative figure with not very little power, and he's fully on board with Agenda 2030. He wears the multicolored lapel pin and everything. He's been derelict of his duty, just as the same as the royal family in England, in Britain. what happened under their watch and what continues to happen under their watch. So there's a lot of problems here. I say here because I lived in Spain for 10 years. And people, it's an important country. Spain is an important country. But people have this impression that, Spain is all sunshine and beaches and isn't it also a Catholic and conservative country and traditional? I still keep hearing that about Spain. It's like, no, Spain is a gay feminist dictatorship. It is extremely left-wing. It has, like, just as in Russia, you have these the demon seed of Bolshevism never went away. It's the same in Spain. The nationalists won the civil war. They won the war, but they lost the peace. The Spanish Bolsheviks, basically, the Spanish communists, won the peace. When the civil war was over and they had lost, well, they found a way to come back to power in the peacetime. And they have marched through the institutions and done what has been done all over the other countries of Europe and the United States and Canada and the rest of it. And they're still going further now. It's the same thing. Hate speech laws, control of the media, pushing transgenderism, feminism, all of it. And now what we're getting to see here, though, with the result, the fallout from this disaster, or whatever it is the blatant malevolence of these people in power. These people who are so malevolent and antagonistic towards their own people, who are just careerist, managerial types that don't care about anything except their own careers and their toxic ideology. And so that is what I want to be put on full display in front of the world's eyes. And that's why I thought it'd be good for us to talk about this, for your audience to hear a bit about this. And like I said, too, it's the same thing that happened in the United States. There's nothing to suggest that this won't happen in another Western country should a disaster, quote unquote disaster, befall that country. I mean, it seems like unless it happens somewhere in Hungary or Serbia or Poland, if it happens anywhere outside of those countries, if it happens in France, if it happens in Spain, England, Ireland, United States, we're looking at our own governments basically killing us. That's the short of it. That's the long and short of it. So I think that's what people need to see coming out of Spain right now.
Yeah, we had a chat a few years ago now. We talked about feminism, and a lot of people got in touch with me back then. They were very happy that we discussed that, because people don't seem to be aware how progressive Spain is. And when I first arrived here, I had no idea. I thought it was a traditional Catholic country, and very quickly did I find out how progressive it was, and it's become a lot more progressive in the last number of years.
Mm-hmm. I think any Irish listener should be able to relate to that. I mean, it's the same. You look at how it happened in Ireland too. Ireland for so many years was traditional, didn't change very much. The fabric of the nation was intact. The values were more or less shared by all. And now you have this revisionist history. It's also recently this Cillian Murphy film I see is doing this thing as well, where basically up until 5 seconds ago, Ireland was just this bleak, backwards place where there were no gay rights and no abortions, and gays couldn't get married and you couldn't be trans, so Ireland was horrible. All that, and now you look at how quickly Ireland's changed, where now you have pride parades and transgenderism and subversive media and hate speech laws and mass migration and all of it. And it just happens so fast. And so it basically is the same thing that happened. The same thing happened in Spain, just a few decades earlier.
I'm glad you said that, because Spain was ahead of Ireland when it came to progressivism. Ireland, I don't think we really had, this is my impression anyway, we didn't really have a large contingent of, I would say, communists. We obviously we had communists, but we didn't have a large number of them, of the regarding the population. But in Spain, there's always been a large kind of lefty element there. Obviously, you had the Spanish Civil War, which shows. But here's something, Pox, I want to quickly run by you, because I was, I know Spanish people. I know a lot of Spanish people, very nice people generally. My impression of Spanish people, the Spanish people I know anyway, they're very nice people. And during the scamdemic, that, kind-heartedness of the Spaniards was used against them, and many of them still don't realize that. We're in this together. Now, it seems that with the Mediterranean countries, and you should know a thing or two about this because you've spent a lot of time in Italy, you've got some Italian blood as well. There is this, it's like an extreme collectivism. And when there is, this can be used for good and for bad. Unfortunately, during the scamdemic, it was used for bad. You had people policing other people, people, phoning the police to report on their neighbor who had gone out twice to the rubbish skip or whatever. And, but if you could get the right person in power who could wield all that power, all that collectivist power, great things could be achieved in a country like Spain or in a country like Italy. Because it's a very, now I would say I'm more of a Northern European persuasion when it comes to, I'm more of sort of individualistic. And living in a Mediterranean country, I know I'm kind of a fish out of water in that way. But at the same time, I can see great potential in that collectivism, the Mediterranean collectivism. And funnily enough, like a lot of people, would have said, if you had, during the scamdemic, let's say you were told there's going to be a scamdemic, it's going to be draconian all across the world, more or less. Which country in Europe do you think is going to be the strictest? Some people would have said Germany, some people would have said Sweden. Nobody would have said Italy, because we have this impression they like la dolce vita. Spanish people, they like having their siesta and their vino tintos. So, and yet, those were the countries that had the strictest rules, Spain and Italy.
Well, you kind of ended on the right note there, because like you said, I have spent a large part of my life living amongst these people. I don't just have some Italian blood. My father's Italian. It's my entire paternal side are all Italians, and I've lived in Italy, and of course I spend time with my Italian family. And I have been trying all my life to figure out people from this part of the world, because they contradict the stereotypes. They confirm them in some cases, but they, in my experience, they more often contradict the stereotypes. And so this idea that the Mediterranean peoples, Italians, Spaniards, and I sometimes I don't even like to use the term Mediterranean Europeans or even Southern Europeans, because when you look at a country like Italy, a large part of that country is mountainous, and a lot of people live in the north. Actually, the north of Italy is more populated, more densely populated, and it's mountainous and cold, and it's not, sunny beaches all the time. In winter, there's snow, there's rain, it's miserable. If you don't like that kind of weather, if you're expecting that, sunshine and dolce vita. Same with Spain. Once you get out of Andalusia, you get into, or if you go to other areas, if you go into the Pyrenees, if you go up north to Asturias, like I said earlier, it's wet, it's rainy, it's green, there's cliffs, the diet changes, and so calling it just Mediterranean, like as if everyone is just, lounging on these Mediterranean beaches and drinking Aperol Spritz. That's just not what it's like. And, I remember in Homage to Catalonia by Orwell, when he writes about his time in the Spanish Civil War, he writes that the Spaniards are a people who will kind of, faff about, but when it's time to roll up the sleeves and do work, they are the best at it. He's never seen anyone like it. They are so efficient, they are so determined, they are so indefatigable, and they'll get the job done and you know, do the work. And so there is that collectivity, but I don't think people in this part of Europe are more inclined to be collectivist. I just think actually what we see now is people are more docile. They just do what they're told now. And you might see a bit more rebellion in a country like Ireland, in a small town in Ireland, or the countryside in Ireland, or the United States. Certainly in the United States, you know, you might see people, don't tell me what to do, government, you know, that kind of thing. Whereas in a country like Italy, in a country like Spain, if the government says we're doing this, okay, we're doing this. The government says we can't go out, okay, we can't go out. The government says you have to wear a mask on the train, okay, I'll wear a mask on the train. But then that wasn't just Italy and Spain that were like that. It was all of Europe was like that. And except for the countries like Sweden that didn't go into lockdown. But if they did, the Swedes would have complied too. I think we're all just sort of like late stage Europeans at this point. We're in the decadent phase of the civilizational cycle. We are weak. We are docile. I include myself in this. I'm not an Ubermensch. I aspire to be. I try to be, but it's very difficult actually in this age that really does conspire to weaken you at all waking moments of every day, and dosify you. If that's a word, I might have just invented a word there. Make you docile. So I don't know if there's anything, you know, I mean, the Germans were National Socialists. People have this idea that the Germanic, the Nordic, you know, German is this independent, free-thinking warrior Ubermensch, because that's what Tacitus said in a work of propaganda. Really, he was trying to inspire the Romans to get out of their civilizational decadence phase, and was giving them an example of a people who were more virile and energetic, these Germanic tribes. But if you read what people say of the Germans going into the post-industrial era, if you read even Hitler's own criticisms of the Germanic peoples, he writes about a people who are docile and obedient and need to be told what to do by a strong leader. Who does that sound like? The Italians, the Spanish. So I think we've all kind of bought into memes and stereotypes, and then are working from misconceptions in order to explain what's going on. Because like I said, I've been here the lion's share of my adult life trying to figure out these people, and so, like I said, it's just so confusing sometimes because they actually contradict the stereotypes more often than they confirm them.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because, you know, a lot of Spanish people before this pandemic, they would say, you know, you have the right to do what you want to do if you want to go out, but then very quickly that goes out the window. And yeah, anyway, I would,
well, you know, like
go ahead.
I would say too, just like Spain for me, years ago, when it wasn't that bad, I've watched Spain get worse in front of my own eyes. I've watched most of the world that I know get worse in front of my own eyes. Spain to me was always sensual. That's what Spain had. Spain was sensual, and I mean that in all senses of the word. Your senses. It was a place with music. It was a sexy place. It was a place where people were very tactile. There were good relations between men and women. People flirted. People danced. The sun stays out so late during the summer. They love a party. And what's happened now with, you know, half a decade of this socialist government and a decade or more of feminist subversion and incursion, the arrival of the transgender stuff, political correctness, all of that sensuality has been undermined and chipped away at and actually even extinguished. And now Spain is an exhausting place to be. It's a place full of tension. The relations between the sexes are decrepit. There are cities that look really bad, actually, decrepit too. We can use the same word to describe huge parts of cities that just look bad now. And the culture, that sensual culture, has changed, where now it's actually just dominated by reggaeton music and people wanting to get drunk. Instead of having a good time, they just want to get drunk. This is kind of like American stuff. I remember Americans behaving this way, or even gotta be honest, some Irish people behave this way. The idea is to just get drunk as fast as possible, drink as much alcohol as possible. That was not a Spanish thing, or even an Italian thing. I've seen this happening in Italy as well. You don't get drunk. You go out to have a few drinks with your friends, but your culture is one where you don't need to get drunk to have a good time with your friends, or to plant that kiss on the girl you like, or to ask for a dance. Your culture already invites you to do all those things. It's a sensual culture, and that's all been eroded.
Yeah, I can vouch for that. Like I would say 10 years ago, 12 years ago, it was rare that you'd see someone drunk on the streets. Now it's quite common. And as you said, the idea was they would go out and they would go and they would have their drinks and their tapas, and they would talk a lot. So they wouldn't have the time to drink so much because they'd be talking all the time. And this idea, this tactile culture you talk of, I'm sure multiculturalism has thrown a spanner in the works there as well, because if someone comes from a different country, you might say, oh, I can't kiss them on the cheek, that could offend them, or I can't, put my hand on their shoulder when they tell a joke, because maybe, and then you've got the feminist thing as well. If I put my hand on this girl's shoulder, she could have me up in front of a judge in the morning. So it's horrible. And
you're not exaggerating.
You've witnessed this societal decay in a country. I've witnessed it, and it's horrible. And unfortunately, a lot of people, they know that things were better 10 or 15 years ago, but they don't seem to have the ability, or maybe they just don't want to do it. They don't want to, figure out what components have led to this decay. They don't want to do it.
Especially here, because whatever your thoughts, and for most of us, let's be honest, we don't know anything about what it was like to live under Franco. We don't know anything about him. We don't know anything about what life was like during the Spanish Civil War. We just live off of memes about these people and these times. And of course, Franco might be more aligned with our views of things. But let's be honest and say that, the people who lived during the Civil War, whatever side you were on, it was pretty terrible. Like, the worst kind of war is a civil war. Your entire country just falls into ruin, and there's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to escape. And it's brother versus brother, father versus son, neighbors versus neighbors. It's very bad. And then, like I said, the nationalists won. They won the war, but they lost the peace. And so what happens is the winners get to write the story, but only if they win the peace as well. And the communists won the peace, and so they've got to tell the story. And people who grew up during the war and in the post-war, the Franco era, those who were not on the side of the nationalists have this chip on their shoulder and this almost like trauma about how bad it was during Franco. For them, because they were communists. They were his enemies. So of course he treated you poorly. But if you look at all the data during Franco, Spain was a successful industrial country. Birth rates were high, salaries were high, families were happy. There was national production, national industries. There's actually memes, talking about memes. There's this Spanish meme that I've seen dozens of times. It's in Spanish, but it says like graphics in Spain be like, and it's just like a cosas buenas, good things during Franco, cosas malas, bad things going, and that line's shooting up after Franco. So it's like good things, the line goes up, this green line is going up, and it's, good things during Franco, and then bad things happening after Franco. And it's true in many ways. But if you lived under Franco and you weren't on Franco's side, you had a bad time. And there was a lot of people who had that bad time. And then they passed down their stories to their children and grandchildren, and now they have this idea that Franco was so evil. And like I said, they won the peace. They got to tell the story. So now the narrative is Franco was a dictator, and of course that just automatically means bad. But now we have a democracy and we have women's rights and abortions. And, oh, Spain was one of the first European countries to legalize gay marriage. Look how progressive and advanced we are and how benighted we were during the Franco era. And so for a huge swathe of the country to admit that things are bad now, that things are not going well now, and that things are really bad compared to what they were like in the 70s and the 60s during Franco, that for them, it's almost like physically impossible. They just can't do it. And I know people like this personally. They will never be able to countenance the reality that things are bad now because of progressivism, because of democracy, because of feminism, because of all the things that they hold dear. They will never be able to admit that. And it's a real shame. It's a real shame. It's dangerous, actually. It's killing us.
I agree. And with that, I will end this recording. Pox Populi, thanks for coming on. I will leave links to Pox's Substack in the description. I recommend people go over there, subscribe to him, and check out his articles. I leave you, Pox, with the final word. I think you've already given it, but go ahead.
Yeah. I won't rant and ramble any longer. Thanks for having me on again. Always good to chat. Arriba España. Vamos.